We go. Hi, Sara Lee. Welcome. So glad to have you here. Why don't you, anything you want to share about how people can advance on the path and win mastery?
Well, I don't know if I can share about how people can advance on the path and win mastery because it's an ongoing experience. But if you want to know what drew me to the teachings, I would like to tell you certain of my experiences, if that's what interests you also.
Yes.
Okay, so this is something that actually happened to me when I was 20 years old, and this is before I knew anything about the teachings. I was in Mexico City. I was actually staying with a family there. It was my junior year, I believe, or my senior year, possibly of college, and I was living with a family, and I loved it. I was speaking Spanish with them, and what happened is I was in Mexico City. I was in what's called the this huge plaza, okay, and in the middle of the plaza was this was a statue of, it was called the El Ángel de la Independencia, which is the angel of independence. And so I was looking at that, and I was standing actually on the sidewalk, and there was a median. In other words, it was a strip of cement. And I was standing on that strip of cement, and it was a huge plaza ahead of me with a lot of people and a lot of stores. And I was going to walking off the median so I could cross. So I walked off the median. And the next second, my body was in the air, at least 10 to 15 feet. Gently, I was turned around so that my feet now and gently placed on the median again so that my feet touched the median. And the next second, a motorcycle turned the corner and zoomed right around me. If I had not been lifted up into the air, I would have been gone because that's how quickly it happened. It happened in one split second. This has never happened or had never happened to me before. I have no understanding of what happened, what it was, what went on. It was so unlike anything I had ever experienced in my life that I just promptly pushed it aside because I didn't know how to deal with it. So I pushed it aside and I went on with my life. And I was 20 years old at the time. I bring this up for a reason. I'm going to change the concept, or not only the concept, but I'm going to change what I speak about is before we get to mastery on the path, we want to know what is it that drew us to the teachings. So this was part of the teachings, whether I knew it or not. This was Archangel Michael. I believe that I was saved by Archangel Michael, and I believe it to this day. And I've always loved Archangel Michael. I've always loved him. I say always, always meaning once I came into the teachings, I did not know anything about Archangel Michael before that, except my experience with him, that I didn't realize who he was. And I didn't realize who he was at that time. So anyway, I went on with my life. In 1976, I was walking with a friend. I was a teacher at the time. I was walking with a friend down in Manhattan, taking a walk, a Sunday walk. And I crossed a street. It was about maybe Madison Avenue or probably Madison Avenue. And they had like a middle, in other words, I passed as I crossed the street, there was what would you call it? A place where you
Oh,
put pictures of, what do you call that? A place where you put pictures. You paste pictures against it. In other words, a huge round uh,
kiosk.
pillar
Kiosk.
kiosk where you pick. Thank you. Kiosk where you place your pictures. And I looked at the kiosk, and as I looked at the kiosk, I was absolutely magnetized to it. I turned around, I stopped walking. I stopped walking at that moment, turned straight towards the kiosk where I was looking at nothing else but the kiosk. And I saw a poster advertising the 1976 summer class. and it was, I believe it was the Eastern Adepts were advertised on that poster. Probably Confucius, Lord Ling, all not Lord Ling, Confucius and Lord Lanto, and all the Eastern Adepts were there. That was the connection I made with the teachings. Now, why do I tell you this? Because I am one of Linello's 10,000. Linello has said that he and K17 looked in the files. They looked into the files and saw that in all of Linello's lifetimes, he had made contact with 10,000 people, and they're called Linello's 10,000. And these are the people that he was going to attract to this class in 1976 simply by putting his electronic presence over the poster. And when anyone who was one of his 10,000 would pass that poster, wherever it was put, they would immediately be mesmerized, go right into the poster and make that contact with him at that moment, and then go ahead to the class. This was their way they did it then. So that's what happened with me. So I am one of Linello's 10,000. So at any rate, at that moment, I made contact. It's like my whole life changed, and I knew I was going to go to that class. It was going to be held in Washington, D.C., and it was I only actually, that's another whole story. It was Washington, D.C. 2 days later, maybe 1 or 2 days later, I got on the bus myself, Greyhound bus, and went to Washington, D.C. And I went to the university there. I forget the name of the university, but it's the Washington University, the university from in Washington, D.C. And I went to the class. Now, I only stayed one day because I believe I was staying with my cousins who lived in Washington there. Well, they actually lived right outside of Washington. They lived in Maryland. But I went to the class, and I went into the first time I had ever been in a class from the Summit Lighthouse. I didn't know what it was. I was totally new. I sat down, and I don't even remember who the masters who were advertised there were the let's see, it was not God and Goddess Meru, but it was two other masters were advertised for that particular Helios and Vesta. Helios and Vesta were the ones that were going to dictate at that particular in that particular dictation. But what they did when they dictated, and this is something that is also absolutely true and amazing, what they did is they actually stood up, the whole audience stood up and they clapped for a master who had come to that place. He had just been lifted up in his initiations. He had just passed an initiation, and he was being applauded, and he was being honored for having passed a certain initiation. He was supposed to go to another planet to get that accolade, but he decided to come to the class because he wanted his cheerleaders to be there. That's what he said. That was the great divine director. So, not knowing anything, everybody stood up and clapped for him. And of course, I stood up and clapped for him. I didn't have no idea what was going on, but I knew it was something wonderful. So I clapped for him. And then I sat down. At the end of the dictation by Helios and Vesta, but this is where the great divine director received his accolades for having passed an initiation. I left. I guess I just left. I had no time more to devote. I had to go back and go to my, where I was staying in Washington, in Maryland, to my cousin's house, which I did. And subsequently, at that moment, I was in the teachings because I looked for, and that's another story I'll tell. These are all these, when I first came into the teachings, I went back to my house my apartment in Brooklyn, New York. And my mother was going to spend the night with me. So I told her, I had this experience and I was interested in finding out. Oh, I know. I'm joining two things. It didn't happen the same weekend. It happened a little bit later. Okay, so that was one experience. I went to my cousin's house and I spent maybe the weekend with them, and that was wonderful. And then I came home. But at one point along the way, I gave people my name and address. And so they said that they were going to have, a lecture being held there by a member of the Summit Lighthouse. And so I tried to find the place. So what happened is the following. I didn't, they didn't contact me. They didn't contact me. Maybe I forgot to give them my information. Whatever the reason was, they did not contact me. So I started looking around for posters that would tell me where to go. I went to a store in my neighborhood where I was staying in Brooklyn. That's where I lived, in Brooklyn, New York, Brooklyn Heights. And there was a little store there. And the store was filled with posters. It was like the whole window was plastered with posters for this event that I was supposed to go to, the lecture that was being given. I went, oh, I'm so happy. I found it, I found it. And I went to the lecture, and that was the beginning of my interaction with the Summit Lighthouse. So maybe the day later, or maybe a day or so later, my mother came to visit me. I had started talking about my mother. Yes, she came to visit me. She was going to spend the night with me in my apartment. And what I said to her, I said, oh, well, I just found an ISIS store and they have all these posters there, but I think they were selling milk or whatever they were selling. They were selling like a grocery store, but a small one. It was a small store. I go back to the store that I had originally seen all the posters in. And no, nothing. It was like the store was shut. It was like it had been abandoned. Nothing there. I mean, there were posters, but there were like a few of them on the floor, on the ground. And that was it. It was like the store was closed. It was dark. There was nothing going on there. And that was the store. And I came back to my apartment, and I was, I wasn't able to buy what I thought I would buy some milk or something like that. So I have heard, and this is what I heard since then, that when the angels want to contact you, they put up something like that, like have all these posters up and down. And then after you made the contact, there's no need for them anymore. So they take them all away. And that's the end of the store. So that's probably what happened that weekend. It was very interesting. But that's another experience I had. All right. And then, of course, I came into the teachings. And I've been with the teachings ever since. And so I would say that that was my experience in finding the teachings, because I think it's important to see how people find the teachings, since all of us want to contact people. We all want to, increase our ranks, and we want to contact people. So the question is, how shall we go about it? So these are just possibilities of how people can come into the teachings and not even realize it, So that's my story. And I think I'm going to stop then, because this is the perfect time to stop.